My family mocked me as a failure. So I sold the $870,000 condo they were living in and moved on. They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes blood can drown you faster than any flood. My name is Ayanna Brooks, and at 28, I learned that the people who are supposed to lift you up can be the very ones holding you down. This is the story of how I turned their mockery into my motivation and their disrespect into my biggest victory. It started 3 years ago on a rainy Tuesday morning in Chicago. I was sitting in my gray cubicle at Morrison & Associates, staring at spreadsheets that made my soul die a little with each cell I filled. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, and I could hear my coworker Janet complaining about her weekend for the third time that week. That's when it hit me. I was 25 years old, and I was already living like I was finished. I had been coding since I was 16, building websites for my high school friends, creating apps that solved tiny problems in my daily life. Technology wasn't just my hobby, it was my language, my art, my escape. But somewhere along the way, I let my family convince me that computer stuff wasn't a real career for someone like me, a black woman from the South Side who should be grateful for any steady paycheck. Ayanna, you need security, my mother, Diane, would say whenever I mentioned my coding projects. These tech companies, they don't hire people like us for the real jobs. Get your degree, find a nice office job, and stop playing around with those computers. My Aunt Rita was even worse. She'd roll her eyes whenever I talked about the freelance platform I'd been sketching out, a space where creative professionals could connect, collaborate, and get paid fairly. Girl, you've been talking about this computer nonsense for years. When you gonna grow up and get serious about your life? My 2 older brothers, Marcus and Damon, treated my dreams like entertainment. Marcus, who worked construction, would laugh and say, Ayanna thinks she's gonna be the next Steve Jobs. Girl, you can't even afford to fix your car. Damon, who managed a restaurant, would add, she's living in fantasy land. Probably watched too many movies about people getting rich off the internet. But that Tuesday morning, something shifted inside me. I looked around that office, at all the people who looked like they'd given up on their dreams decades ago, and I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my laptop, typed out my resignation letter, and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Walking into our family Sunday dinner that week felt like entering a courtroom where I was already guilty. The smell of my mom's pot roast filled the small dining room, but the atmosphere was thick with judgment. I sat down at the worn wooden table we'd eaten at since I was a kid, took a deep breath, and dropped the bomb. I quit my job, I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. The room went dead silent. My fork clinked against my plate, sounding louder than a gunshot. Then the storm hit. You what? My mother's voice pitched higher. Ayanna, please tell me you're joking. Aunt Rita dropped her napkin. Child, have you lost your natural mind? You had a good job with benefits. Marcus started laughing, not the good kind of laughter, but the cruel kind that cuts deep. Oh, this is rich. Miss Computer Genius thinks she's about to make it big. What's your plan, sis? YouTube videos about how to restart your router. Damon shook his head like I'd just told him I was joining a cult. Ayanna, you can't eat dreams. You can't pay rent with hopes and wishes. You got a degree, you had a stable job. I had a job that was finishing me slowly. I interrupted, my voice getting stronger. Every day, I sat in that cubicle feeling like I was betraying everything I'm passionate about. I have a business plan, I have skills, and I have vision. Vision don't pay bills, my mother snapped. You think you're special? You think you're different from all the other people who tried to make it in this world and failed. That word, failed, hit me like a slap. But instead of backing down, it lit a fire in me. I'm not going to fail, I said, looking each of them in the eye. I'm building something that matters. A platform where creative freelancers can connect with clients, where they can showcase their work, manage their projects, and get paid fairly. The creative economy is worth billions, and most of those billions go to middlemen who don't understand the work. Aunt Rita waved her hand dismissively. There she goes with that computer talk again. Ayanna, baby, you need to come back to reality. You're a young black woman with student loans and rent to pay. This ain't the time for experimenting. When is the time? I asked, my voice rising. When I'm 40 and full of regret. When I'm 60 and wondering what would have happened if I'd just tried. Marcus leaned back in his chair, smirking. You gonna be wondering where your next meal is coming from. You still living off ramen and Wi-Fi dreams. The whole table erupted in laughter at that line. Even my sweet grandmother, who usually stayed quiet during family arguments, chuckled and shook her head. Baby girl, your granddaddy always said, don't quit your day job until your night job pays better. But I had already made up my mind. That night, I went home to my small apartment, opened my laptop, and started coding. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Not because someone was paying me, but because I believed in what I was building. The next few months were brutal. My savings ran out faster than I expected. I had to move out of my apartment and crash on my friend Maya's couch. Maya, bless her heart, never made me feel like a burden, but I could see the worry in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Family gatherings became torture sessions. Every holiday, every birthday, every random Sunday dinner became an opportunity for them to remind me of my poor choices. How's that computer business going? Marcus would ask with fake sweetness. Making millions yet? Ayana, you know it's not too late to find another real job, my mother would say, her voice dripping with concern and disappointment. I talked to Mrs. Johnson, and she said they're hiring at the bank. Damon would chime in, yeah, my manager is always looking for good people. You could probably start as a server, work your way up to assistant manager in a few years. They meant well, at least I tried to tell myself they meant well. But every suggestion felt like a small death. Every helpful comment felt like they were asking me to amputate my dreams. The worst part was how they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear. I'd walk into a room and catch the tail end of conversations. Poor Ayana. She's really struggling. I don't know what got into that girl's head. She used to be so smart and practical. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Maya was asleep, I'd open my laptop and lose myself in code. Lines of JavaScript became my poetry. Database structures became my architecture. User interface designs became my art. I was building something beautiful, something that could change how creative people worked and lived. I started reaching out to freelancers, photographers, graphic designers, writers, videographers, and every conversation confirmed what I already knew. They were talented, they were hungry, but they were drowning in a sea of platforms that took huge cuts of their earnings, clients who didn't respect their work, and systems that weren't built for them. My platform would be different. It would be built by creatives, for creatives. It would have fair pricing, transparent communication tools, project management features that actually made sense, and a community aspect that treated freelancers like the professionals they were. But explaining this to my family was like trying to describe color to someone who'd never seen. They couldn't envision a world where someone like me could build something significant. They couldn't imagine that their little Ayana, the girl who used to help them set up their email accounts, could create something that mattered. You still doing that computer stuff? Became their favorite greeting. Not, how are you? Or, how's your project going? Just that dismissive little phrase that made my life's work sound like a hobby I'd eventually outgrow. What they didn't know, what I didn't tell them, was that I was quietly building something massive. Every rejection from investors taught me something new about my pitch. Every bug in my code made me a better developer. Every late night fueled by instant coffee and determination brought me closer to something they couldn't see coming. I was about to prove them all wrong. I just didn't know it yet. The dream they laughed at was about to become their reality check. And mine was about to become their nightmare. 2 years. That's how long I lived like a ghost, surviving on determination and dollar store pasta. Maya's couch became my headquarters, her Wi-Fi became my lifeline, and her bathroom mirror witnessed more pep talks than any mirror should have to endure. You got this, Ayana. I'd whisper to my reflection at 3 a.m. after another 18-hour coding session. My eyes were bloodshot. My hair was a mess, but my platform was taking shape. Creative Connect wasn't just code anymore. It was becoming real. The rejections came like clockwork. 47 investor meetings. 47 versions of thanks, but no thanks. Some were polite. We love the concept, but we're not sure about market fit. Others were brutal. The freelance space is too crowded. Besides, you don't have the experience to execute at this level. One investor, a silver-haired man in a suit that cost more than my yearly food budget, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Young lady, maybe you should consider working for an established tech company first. Get some real experience under your belt." Real experience. As if the thousands of hours I'd spent building, testing, and refining my platform didn't count. As if the sleepless nights and empty stomach didn't qualify as payment enough for my education. But something funny happens when you get knocked down 47 times. You stop feeling the punch. You start getting back up faster. You learn to pivot, to adapt, to find new angles. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Maria Santos, a freelance photographer I'd interviewed for market research, introduced me to her client, a small marketing agency that was fed up with existing freelance platforms. They needed something better, something that understood their workflow. "We'll be your beta customer," said Jake Chen, the agency's founder. "But we want equity in exchange for being your testing ground." It wasn't the millions I'd dreamed of, but it was validation. Real money, real users, real proof that Creative Connect worked. 6 months later, Jake introduced me to his mentor, Sarah Kim, a Korean-American venture capitalist who specialized in diversity-focused investments. Sarah didn't just see my platform, she saw me. She understood what it meant for a Black woman to bootstrap a tech company while sleeping on couches and eating cereal for dinner. "I've been where you are," she told me over coffee in her downtown office. Not exactly, but close enough. The world told me I didn't belong in venture capital. I proved them wrong by writing bigger checks than they did. Sarah's firm led my seed round, $2.8 million. Not the biggest round in Silicon Valley history, but it felt like winning the lottery. For the first time in 2 years, I could breathe. I could eat real food. I could move off Maya's couch. But instead of getting myself a fancy apartment, I made a decision that would change everything. My family had just lost their house. Marcus had co-signed a loan for his girlfriend's business, some pyramid scheme that collapsed faster than a house of cards. The bank came for their house, and suddenly my mom, Aunt Rita, Marcus, Damon, and his 2 kids were facing homelessness. They were too proud to ask me for help directly. Instead, I heard about it through the family grapevine. My cousin Jasmine called me, whispering like she was sharing state secrets. "Ayana, they're really struggling. Your mama's been staying at Rita's, but Rita's lease is up next month. Marcus is talking about moving the whole family into a motel until they figure something out." My heart broke, but not for the reasons you might think. It broke because even in their desperation, they couldn't bring themselves to ask me, the failure, for help. That's when I found the condo. $870,000. Downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a view of the lake that made you forget your troubles. It was everything I dreamed of having one day. I bought it with my first real profit from Creative Connect. The closing was surreal. Me, sitting in a lawyer's office, signing papers that made me the owner of nearly $1 million worth of real estate. The same girl who'd been eating ramen noodles for dinner 6 months earlier. But I didn't tell my family I owned it. Instead, I showed up at Aunt Rita's crowded apartment with what I told them was the best news ever. "I found you guys a place," I announced, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. "Downtown condo, fully furnished, and the owner is letting you stay rent-free for a while." The room went silent. My mother looked suspicious. "Ayana, what kind of strings are attached to this? Nobody just gives away free housing." "No strings," I lied smoothly. "I know someone who knows someone. The owner travels a lot and just wants someone responsible to keep an eye on the place." Aunt Rita squinted at me. "And they chose us based on your recommendation? The girl who can't even keep a steady job." That stung, but I pushed through. "They need someone trustworthy. I vouched for you." Marcus crossed his arms. "What's the catch, Ayana? This sounds too good to be true." "Sometimes good things just happen," I said, handing him the keys. "Maybe it's about time our family caught a break." They moved in the next week. I watched them explore the condo like kids in a candy store, marveling at the granite countertops, the stainless steel appliances, the view that made them gasp. For a moment, I let myself imagine telling them the truth, imagining their faces when they realized their struggling little Ayana had just given them a mansion. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I wanted to see how they'd treat me when they thought I was still the failure, still the dreamer who couldn't get her life together. It's just temporary, I told them as they settled in. Until you get back on your feet. They never asked who owned the place. They never wondered how I'd managed to connect with such a generous stranger. They just accepted their good fortune and forgot to thank the person who'd made it possible. What they didn't know was that I was watching, waiting, building something even bigger while they lived in luxury I'd provided. The startup grind was far from over. But for the first time, I was winning silently. And sometimes, silent victories are the sweetest ones of all. The first time I walked into my own condo after they'd settled in, I barely recognized it. It had been 3 weeks since they'd moved in, and I'd given them space to get comfortable. But when I knocked on the door, my own door, I felt like a stranger asking for permission to enter. "Oh, Ayana," my mother said, opening the door with a look of mild annoyance. "What are you doing here?" What was I doing there? I was visiting the home I owned, checking on the family I'd saved from homelessness. But I couldn't say that. "Just wanted to see how you all were settling in," I said, stepping inside. "Thought maybe I could help with anything you needed." Aunt Rita looked up from the couch, my couch, where she was watching her stories on the 65-inch TV I'd had installed. "Help with what?" "We got everything handled. This place runs itself." The condo looked lived in, which should have made me happy. But there was something about the way they'd arranged things, the way they moved through the space, that made it clear they saw this as their home now. Not a temporary blessing. Not a gift. Just theirs. Marcus walked out of the kitchen, holding a beer from the fridge I'd stocked. "Ayana, good to see you. You want something to drink?" "Oh wait, I forgot. You probably can't afford to contribute to the grocery fund." He laughed like it was a joke, but the sting was real. I was buying their groceries through a delivery service anonymously, but they didn't know that. They thought they were managing everything themselves. "I'm good," I said, forcing a smile. "Just wanted to check on everyone." "Well, we're doing fine," Damon said, emerging from the master bedroom. "Better than fine, actually. This place is a blessing. Makes me feel like I'm finally living the life I deserve. The life he deserved. In the home I'd bought. With the money I'd earned. While they still saw me as the family failure. That's when I noticed the dishes in the sink, a mountain of plates, cups, and pots that had been sitting there for days. The kitchen counter was cluttered with takeout containers and empty bottles. The living room had newspapers scattered across the coffee table, and someone had left their shoes right in the middle of the floor. "Looks like you guys have been busy," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Maybe I could help clean up a bit?" My cousin Jasmine, who'd been staying over more often since the family had upgraded their living situation, looked up from her phone. "Actually, Ayana, since you're here and you ain't working anyway, could you wash up those dishes?" I was going to do it, but my nails just got done. The room went quiet for a moment. Everyone looked at me expectantly, like it was the most natural thing in the world for me to clean up their mess. "I mean, it's not like you got anywhere else to be," Marcus added with a chuckle. "Might as well make yourself useful." I stared at the dishes, then at their faces. These were the people I'd saved from homelessness. These were the people living rent-free in luxury because of my success. And they were asking me to clean up after them like hired help. "Sure," I said quietly, rolling up my sleeves. "I can do that." As I washed their dishes in my kitchen, I listened to them talk about their lives like I wasn't there. Aunt Rita complained about her job at the department store. Marcus bragged about a promotion he might get. Damon talked about taking his kids to Disney World next summer. "This place is such a blessing," my mother said for the 3rd time that day. "Whoever owns it must be some kind of angel, letting us stay here for free like this." "Probably some rich white person with more money than sense," Aunt Rita added. "You know how they are, always trying to feel good about themselves by helping poor black folks." I scrubbed a pot harder than necessary. Poor black folks. That's what they thought they were. What they thought I was. The visits got worse after that. Every time I came by, there was something for me to do. Vacuuming, taking out trash, organizing their mail. Little tasks that somehow always fell to me, the only one who wasn't busy with real work. They'd introduce me to their friends and neighbors with barely concealed embarrassment. "This is Ayana, my daughter," my mother would say. "She's still trying to find her way. Bless her heart." Or worse, "This is my niece Ayana. She's been struggling since she quit her job to chase some computer dream. We're trying to help her get back on her feet." The neighbors would give me pitying looks, the same looks I'd gotten my whole life. Poor Ayana, still trying to make it, still failing to grow up. One evening, I overheard them talking to Mrs. Patterson from next door. She'd asked about the condo, how they'd managed to afford such a nice place. "Oh, we didn't buy it," Aunt Rita said with a wave of her hand. "Some family friend hooked us up. Real generous person, but you know how it is, they probably got more money than they know what to do with." "That's wonderful," Mrs. Patterson said. "And Ayana, is she your daughter?" "She's my sister's girl," Aunt Rita replied. "Sweet child, but she's going through a phase. Quit her good job to play around with computers. We're letting her come around, trying to keep her grounded in reality." Playing around with computers. That's what they called the work that had bought them their dream home. The final straw came 3 months later. I'd stopped by to drop off some groceries, still anonymously, still playing the role of the struggling family member who occasionally helped out. I found them hosting a dinner party. The dining room table was set with elegant dishes I'd never seen before. Candles flickered in crystal holders. Wine glasses sparkled under the chandelier. My family was entertaining like they were millionaires. "Ayana," my mother called out when she saw me. "Perfect timing. We're having a little dinner party, but we could use some help in the kitchen." I looked around the table at the faces I didn't recognize, well-dressed people who looked like they belonged in a place like this. Then I looked at my family, who were clearly playing the part of successful hosts. "Actually," I said, "I just came by to—" "The dishes need washing," Jasmine interrupted. "And maybe you could help serve dessert? I know you're good at that kind of thing." That kind of thing. Service work. Manual labor. The only thing they thought I was qualified for. As I stood there in my own dining room, looking at my family treating me like hired help while they entertained guests in luxury I'd provided, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was cruelty. They weren't just failing to appreciate my success. They were actively trying to keep me small, to make sure I never forgot my place in their hierarchy. But they had no idea that their hierarchy was built on a foundation I owned. And foundations, I was learning, could be very easily removed. The invitation came 3 days before my niece Sarah's 8th birthday. Not a phone call, not a text message, but a formal printed invitation slipped under my apartment door like I was just another neighbor they barely knew. "You're cordially invited to celebrate Zara's 8th birthday party," it read in fancy script. "Saturday, March 15th, 2 p.m. at the downtown residence." The downtown residence. That's what they were calling my condo now. Not the place we're staying or the temporary apartment. It had become their residence, their address, their identity. I should have stayed home. Every instinct told me to throw that invitation in the trash and spend Saturday working on Creative Connect's latest feature updates. But Zara was innocent in all this. She was just a little girl who deserved to have her aunt at her birthday party. So I bought her a gift, a coding kit for kids, complete with colorful blocks that taught basic programming concepts. It cost me $89, which wasn't much compared to the $870,000 I'd spent housing her family, but it was thoughtful, age-appropriate, educational. I should have known better. When I arrived at the condo, my condo, the place was transformed. Balloons in pink and gold filled the living room. A professional photographer was capturing every moment. The dining table groaned under the weight of catered food that must have cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Ayana." Zara ran up to me, her princess dress sparkling. "You came. Look at my party. It's beautiful, baby girl," I said, hugging her tight. "Happy birthday." I handed her the coding kit, and her eyes lit up. "What is it?" "It's a way to learn how computers think," I explained. You can build games and... Oh, Ayana, my mother interrupted, appearing beside us with a forced smile. How creative. Zara, sweetie, why don't you put that with the other gifts? The grown-ups need to talk. The other gifts. I glanced at the present table and felt my stomach drop. An American Girl doll, a pink electric scooter, a jewelry-making kit that probably cost 3 times what I'd spent. Professional, expensive, impressive gifts that made my educational coding kit look like an afterthought. Ayana, Aunt Rita approached, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. We didn't expect you to show up looking like that. I looked down at my outfit. Dark jeans, a nice sweater, comfortable flats. Clothes that were clean, appropriate, and honestly more expensive than they realized. My startup was doing well enough that I could afford quality basics now. But compared to everyone else at the party, who were dressed like they were attending a wedding, I looked underdressed. I thought it was a kid's birthday party, I said quietly. Well, yes, but we're trying to make a good impression, Marcus said, loud enough for several nearby parents to hear. You know how it is. We want people to see that we're doing well for ourselves. Doing well for themselves. In my home, with my success subsidizing their image. The photographer approached our group. Let's get a family photo with the birthday girl. Everyone gathered around Zara, arranging themselves in perfect poses. I started to step into the group when Aunt Rita held up her hand. Actually, she said, her voice carrying across the room, let's just do immediate family first. Ayana, could you step back a bit? The room went quiet. Not dead quiet. The music was still playing, other conversations were still happening, but quiet enough that I felt every eye on me. Quiet enough that I heard someone whisper, "Who's that?" And then came the response that shattered something inside me. Don't mind Ayana. She's still finding herself. Still finding herself. Like I was a lost teenager instead of a 28-year-old woman who'd built a successful business from nothing. Like I was a charity case instead of the person paying for their dream lifestyle. The laughter that followed wasn't malicious. It was worse. It was dismissive. Pitying. The kind of laughter people make when they feel sorry for someone who doesn't even realize how pathetic they are. I stood there, holding my purse, watching my family pose for pictures in my living room while a photographer I was indirectly paying captured their perfect family moment. A moment that didn't include me. Should we tell them about the college fund? One of the guests whispered to another. The one the generous benefactor set up for the kids? College fund. There was no college fund. They were making things up now, creating elaborate stories about mysterious benefactors and generous strangers. Anything to explain their sudden upgrade in lifestyle without having to admit they didn't know where it came from. Such a blessing, someone else murmured. In times like these, when good people look out for each other. Good people. They thought some anonymous good person was taking care of them. They never suspected that the good person was standing right there, being excluded from family photos. The breaking point came when Zara opened her gifts. The room oohed and awed over each expensive present. When she got to mine, she held up the coding kit with genuine excitement. Look, Aunt Ayana got me something to learn computers with. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Oh, sweetie, my mother said, her voice dripping with embarrassment. That's nice. But maybe we should focus on your other gifts right now. Marcus laughed outright. Leave it to Ayana to turn a birthday party into a computer science lesson. Girl, she's 8 years old, not applying to MIT. She's trying to turn our baby into a nerd, Aunt Rita added, and the room erupted in laughter again. But the worst came from Damon, who I'd always thought was the kindest of my brothers. Ayana thinks everyone should be as obsessed with computers as she is. Can't just let kids be kids. As obsessed with computers as I was. The computers that had earned the money that bought the home they were celebrating in. The computers that had built the platform that was generating the revenue that kept their lights on. I looked around the room one more time. At the beautiful decorations I'd unknowingly paid for. At the expensive gifts that made mine look cheap. At the family that had written me out of their success story while living in luxury I'd provided. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, staring at my laptop screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling with rage and hurt and a clarity I never felt before. They would never respect me because they never wanted to. They needed me to be the failure so they could feel successful. They needed me to be small so they could feel big. But I wasn't small anymore. And it was time they found out exactly how big I'd become. I opened my real estate app and typed in my address. Listed my condo for immediate sale. Cash offers only. It was time for them to learn who'd been taking care of them all along. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, but because I was busy. By 3 a.m., I had 3 cash offers on the condo. By 6 a.m., I'd accepted one from a tech executive who was relocating from San Francisco. By 8 a.m., I'd scheduled the closing for the following week. But the universe, it seemed, had bigger plans for my revenge. At 9:47 a.m. on Sunday morning, exactly 14 hours after I'd listed the condo, my phone rang. Unknown number, but something told me to answer. Ayanna Brooks. The voice was crisp, professional, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Speaking. This is Chun Wei, CEO of Global Tech Solutions. I hope I'm not calling too early. Global Tech Solutions. I knew that name. They were one of the biggest tech conglomerates in the world, the kind of company that bought innovative platforms and turned them into billion-dollar ecosystems. Not too early at all. I managed, my heart suddenly racing. I'll cut to the chase, Ms. Brooks. We've been watching Creative Connect for the past 6 months. Your user growth is impressive, but what really caught our attention is your community engagement rates. 73% monthly active users? In the freelance space? That's unprecedented. I gripped the phone tighter. Thank you. We've worked hard to build something special. We'd like to buy it. All of it. Creative Connect, your team, your technology stack. We're prepared to offer $65 million with an additional $15 million in performance bonuses over the next 2 years. The world stopped. $65 million. $15 million more in bonuses. $80 million total for the platform I'd built while my family mocked my computer stuff. I started, then stopped. My brain couldn't process the numbers. Could you repeat that? Chun Wei chuckled. $65 million, Ms. Brooks. Plus performance incentives. We see Creative Connect as the foundation for our new Creator Economy division. You'd lead the integration as VP of Creator Relations, with full autonomy over product development. VP of Creator Relations. A title that came with its own corner office, stock options, and a salary that would make my family's condescension look even more ridiculous than it already was. When would you need an answer? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. We're hoping to close this week. Would Tuesday work for you? We can fly you out to our headquarters, or if you prefer, we can come to Chicago. Tuesday. The same day my family would be getting their eviction notice. Tuesday works perfectly, I said. Let's do it in Chicago. I have some personal business to handle that day. We talked for another 20 minutes about details, timelines, and integration plans. When I hung up, I sat in my apartment for a full hour, staring at my laptop screen, trying to process what had just happened. I was about to become a multimillionaire. Not just comfortable, not just successful, wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined. And my family, who'd spent years treating me like a failure, would find out on the same day they discovered I owned their dream home. Monday morning, I called my real estate agent. Margaret, I need to move up the closing. Can we do it tomorrow instead of next week? Tomorrow? Ayanna, that's very tight. The buyers would have to agree. They will. They're paying cash and they're relocating for work. Time is more valuable to them than bureaucracy. She sighed. I'll make some calls. By Monday afternoon, everything was arranged. The closing would be at 9 a.m. Tuesday. The eviction notice would be served at 10 a.m. The global tech signing would be at 2 p.m. It was going to be quite a day. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzly, but I felt like sunshine. I dressed carefully, my best business suit, the one I'd bought for investor meetings. Professional, confident, powerful. The opposite of how I'd looked at Zara's birthday party. The closing went smoothly. At 9:47 a.m., I officially sold my condo for $890,000, $20,000 more than I'd paid for it. The new owners were lovely people who appreciated the space and couldn't wait to make it their own. At 10:15 a.m., I pulled up to the condo in an Uber Black, not my usual economy ride. Through the back window, I could see Marcus stumbling around in his bathrobe, probably hungover from another party they'd thrown in my former home. I walked up to the front door, my former front door, with 3 people behind me. Margaret, my real estate agent, carried official paperwork. Behind her was James Morrison from Morrison Legal Services, dressed in a sharp suit that screamed expensive lawyer. And behind him was David, the driver from the black car service Global Tech had sent to pick me up. I rang the doorbell and waited. Aunt Rita answered, still in her pajamas, her hair wrapped in a colorful scarf. "Ayana, what are you doing here so early? And who are all these people?" "Good morning, Aunt Rita," I said, my voice calm and professional. "These are some business associates of mine. May we come in?" She looked confused but stepped aside. "I guess. But we weren't expecting company. The place is a mess." The place was a mess. Empty bottles from what looked like another dinner party. Dishes piled in the sink. Newspapers scattered across my former coffee table. "Family meeting," I called out loudly, my voice carrying through the condo. "Everyone in the living room, please." One by one, they emerged. My mother, looking worried. Marcus, squinting against what was probably a massive headache. Damon, carrying his youngest son. Even Jasmine, who'd apparently spent the night again. "Ayana, what's going on?" my mother asked. "Why are there strangers in our home?" "Our home." I almost laughed. "Actually," I said, pulling out the paperwork, "that's what we need to talk about. This isn't your home. It never was." I handed the eviction notice to Marcus, who read it with growing confusion and horror. "Wait," he said, his voice rising. "This says the property has been sold. This says we have 30 days to vacate. But we don't rent this place. It belongs to that family friend who..." "Who what?" I interrupted gently. "Who let you stay here rent-free? Who asked for nothing in return? Who watched you live in luxury while treating the person who arranged it like hired help?" The realization hit Aunt Rita first. Her face went white. "No," she whispered. "You own this place? You've owned it this whole time?" I nodded, smiling for the first time in months. "Always did." The silence that followed was beautiful. The silence lasted exactly 47 seconds. I know because I counted. Then came the explosion. "You own this place?" Marcus's voice cracked like he was 13 again. "This whole time you owned it? The struggling computer girl owned $1 million condo?" Aunt Rita's words came out as a whisper, like she couldn't believe what she was saying. My mother just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing without sound. For the first time in my life, Diane Brooks was speechless. "But you were broke," Damon said, his voice small and confused. "You were sleeping on couches. You couldn't afford groceries." "I was investing in my future," I said calmly. "Every dollar I didn't spend on rent went into building Creative Connect. Every sacrifice was for something bigger." Jasmine looked around the condo with new eyes. "All those times you came over to clean and help out, this was your place. We were asking you to clean your own home. While living here for free," I added. "Don't forget that part." The paperwork in Marcus's hands was shaking. 30 days? You're giving us 30 days to find a new place. That's more notice than most landlords give," Margaret said professionally. "And considering you've been living here rent-free, it's quite generous." Aunt Rita's shock was transforming into anger. "Ayana, how could you do this to family? How could you let us think?" "Let you think what?" I interrupted. "That I was a failure? That I was struggling? That I needed your pity and condescension?" My voice stayed level, but each word hit like a hammer. "You thought all those things because you wanted to think them. I never lied to you about my success. You just never asked. But we're family." My mother finally found her voice. "Family helps family. Family doesn't. Family doesn't mock each other's dreams," I said. "Family doesn't exclude each other from photos. Family doesn't make each other feel small so they can feel big." David, the driver, cleared his throat softly. Ms. Brooks, we should head to the global tech meeting soon. All eyes turned to him, then back to me. I could see the questions forming on their faces. That's right, I said, checking my watch. I have a business meeting. Actually, it's more than a meeting. Global Tech Solutions is acquiring Creative Connect today for $80 million. If the silence before was beautiful, this one was symphonic. Marcus dropped the eviction papers. Aunt Rita sat down hard on the couch. My mother's legs seemed to give out, and she grabbed the kitchen counter for support. 80 million? Damon's voice was barely audible. You sold your company for $80 million? I built something that mattered, I said. Something that helps creative people make a living doing what they love. Something that changes how the freelance economy works. While you were laughing at my computer stuff, I was changing an entire industry. Jasmine was crying now, but I couldn't tell if it was from shock or regret. Ayana, we didn't know. We had no idea you were. Successful? Important? Worth listening to? I finished for her. That's the problem. You never thought to find out. You decided who I was and refused to see anything different. Margaret began packing up her paperwork. The new owners will be in touch about the transition timeline. They're very understanding about the situation. As she and the lawyer headed toward the door, my family just stood there, looking lost in what used to be their dream home and was about to become their nightmare. Ayana, my mother said, and for the first time in years, her voice held respect instead of disappointment. Can we talk? Can we work this out? I looked around the condo one last time, at the granite countertops I'd chosen, at the view I'd fallen in love with, at the family I'd tried so hard to help, who'd spent every moment making me feel worthless. The new owners seem lovely, I said instead of answering her question. I'm sure they'll treat this place with the respect it deserves. David opened the door for me, and I walked toward it without looking back. Where will you go? Aunt Rita called out, and I almost laughed at the irony. Now she was worried about where I'd live. I bought a penthouse, I said, pausing at the threshold. Twice the size of this place. Corner unit, panoramic city views, and my name is on the doorbell this time. Ayana, please, Marcus said, and I heard genuine desperation in his voice. We made mistakes. We can fix this. Family is family. I turned back one final time, looking at each of their faces. Faces that had looked at me with pity, dismissal, and barely concealed contempt for years. Faces that were now looking at me with something I'd never seen before, respect mixed with fear. You're right, I said quietly. Family is family. That's why this hurts so much. That's why I hoped for better from all of you. That's why I gave you everything I had and asked for nothing but basic human decency in return. I stepped into the hallway, then looked back one more time. You wanted to see me fail so badly that you couldn't see me succeed. I hope living with that knowledge serves you better than living with my generosity did. The elevator doors closed on their shocked faces, and I never looked back again. 3 months later, I was settled into my new penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, a home office where I could see the entire city, and a kitchen island bigger than my old apartment. My nameplate by the front door read, A. Brooks, in elegant silver letters. I didn't block my family's numbers, but I didn't reach out either. They called sometimes, awkward voicemails full of half apologies and requests to talk things through. I listened to each one once, then deleted them. They wanted me to fail, so I let them live with my success from a distance. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's simply living well while others watch through windows they can't enter. My dreams had become their reality check. And reality, as it turned out, was a lesson they weren't ready to learn. But I was ready to teach it.